I wanted to do this event in Boston because this is a town that I have strong roots in. I graduated high school here. I went to college here. But more importantly, all of my Kennedy grandparents, Kennedy and Fitzgerald grandparents, landed here in 1848, fleeing British oppression and the potato famine back at home. And they arrived here from a nation where for 800 years there was legalized oppression against Irish Catholics. They had not been able to vote, to exercise their franchise. It was illegal for a Catholic to hold political office, to enter a profession, a doctor or attorney. It was, one of my ancestors had a priest that was hanged for teaching my ancestors how to read and write, which was illegal to teach a Catholic at that point. And they landed here and they took to politics like a starving man to food. And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, Honey Fitz, was the first ghetto Irish mayor of Boston. His daughter, Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, was my grandmother. And she loved this country because she understood that this country, for the first time, had given her people the capacity and the opportunity to participate in their own political destiny. And she made her children take the Freedom Walk here in Boston. She took them to Walden Pond on weekends. She took them to Breeds Hill and Bunker Hill and the other major battles of the Revolution. She wanted them to know their history and to love their country. She made all of us, all 29 of her grandchildren, memorize Longfellow's poem. So listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that fateful day and year. And Paul Revere took off 242 years ago last night from the Old North Church in the North End where she was born, my grandmother was born, and he rode out to Concord to alert the countryside, and particularly the Minutemen, that a British troop of 800 men was coming to confiscate their arsenal and their powder dump. And those men met the British Army, the largest and most powerful empire in history, on the Old North Bridge 242 years ago today. And they drove them back. And they chased them in retreat through Concord, through Lexington, through Lincoln, through Arlington, into Cambridge, inflicting terrible casualties. And that was the beginning of the American Revolution, but really the revolution had started 2 years before. And it started when the British had passed an oppressive law raising the taxes on tea in New England. And this was a law that the British Crown made in collusion with the British East India Company, which the king owned shares in, his ministers owned shares in, and most of the aristocracy owned shares in. And it was their plan to impose the tax on New England merchants, but exempt the British East India Company from the tax so that they could undersell everybody and that they would make a profit for their shareholders. So the revolution, and of course, the Americans responded by dressing as Wampanoag Indians and boarding the British East India Company's ships and dumping the tea into the harbor. And that's when the British sent that troop over here to quell the rebellion. So that rebellion was in part against empire, but the spirit of that rebellion was a fury that the colonists had against the corrupt merger of state and corporate power.